And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your rainy, miserable Tuesday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Yesterday, I believe it's April 14th, marked Adrien Brody's 52nd birthday. And Queens, New York native. His mom was a successful photographer, and I'm pretty sure she's still with us, but she was a successful photographer. And he is the answer to a lot of different trivia questions, most of which are kind of silly, even as far as the silliness of Hollywood goes. But he is a two-time Best Actor Oscar winner, and he's the only two-time Best Actor Oscar winner or Best Actress who has only been nominated twice. 2 nominations, 2 wins. It's pretty impressive. And he's someone who is 100% on the short list of greatest living actors. I don't think there are very many people who would dispute it. You can't find a bad Adrien Brody performance, even in films that just are not good. He did an early movie in the 90s called Oxygen, which was, it was really bad. He's great, though. He plays a lunatic who kidnaps a woman and sticks her into a hole to die. Oxygen being a literal title. He is creepy as fuck in that film. The Predators movie, Topher Grace, I think, was also in it. Not very good, but he brings his A game. He just has an authenticity that is very difficult it's difficult to quantify, but it's difficult to match. And it's difficult to be that way in every role, whether it's a period piece, whether it is set in the present day, whether there's a level of artifice, such as King Kong, from about 20 years ago, the Peter Jackson film, or whether it's just straightforward, dramatic film. In the case of Hollywoodland, for example, with Ben Affleck, that's also a period piece set in the 50s or the Hollywood of the 50s. But Adrien Brody is somebody who first got on the radar for people like me for what appeared to be a great reason, and then became kind of tragic and notorious reason, and one of those head scratching where there are certain legendary names in Hollywood that are legendary, normally for good reasons, but occasionally for head scratching, what the fuck is going on here reasons. So me, just as a young, at the time, film school graduate, the first I ever heard the name Adrien Brody was reading of an upcoming film. I had not graduated. This was sometime in 1996. I graduated. I walked with the class of 97, New York University, Cinema Studies, Tisch School of the Arts. That's what my diploma actually says. I'm not pretending. Not that anybody would ask me to produce a diploma, but I could if pushed to a wall. But when I was still attending classes at New York University, there was talk, and the internet existed in 96, let's say early to mid 96, but nothing like now. And I was only on the internet at school, and I didn't really know how to use it yet. This is so much of the Stone Ages, even though 1996, at certain points when I think of my memories, doesn't seem like it was Stone Ages, but relatively speaking, tech-wise, kind of was. So one of the tenured professors in the department, I think it might have been the department chair, who was William Simon at the time. William Simon was famous as a Kubrick scholar who was he was a friend of Stanley Kubrick. Like, he knew Kubrick personally. Kubrick was a Bronx native. Adrien Brody, a Queens native, just for reference. But Professor Simon was the one, I'm almost 100% sure on this, but he was the one who broke the news that Terrence Malick was making a comeback. And Terrence Malick was a name that we studied this guy, but he made 2 movies and pretty much walked away from Hollywood. He did Badlands, he did Days of Heaven, and then he more or less vanished like the proverbial fart in the wind. There were a lot of rumors as to why he vanished. There were reports that he just became a script doctor. He was making decent money. He had famously written a screenplay for Dirty Harry, which ended up not getting used. I got into that in the Terrence Malick episode. It's a fucking funny story that Hollywood accidentally made the movie that we know and love as Dirty Harry, and Terrence Malick got paid a shit ton of money for his script, which was not very good, but Warner Brothers was convinced, in fact, was very good. But that's a separate issue. Terrence Malick left big-time directing after the artistic triumph of Days of Heaven. There are film scholars who would rank that as in the top 25 for sure, greatest American motion pictures ever made. But the drums began to beat, and rumor became reality that sometime in 1996, Terrence Malick signed to write a screenplay adaptation of James Jones' very famous, well-regarded, historically accurate book about the World War II in the Pacific, The Thin Red Line. And we started reading and hearing about certain actors who were cast. And I remember as this film went into production, and Terrence Malick was going to write the screenplay and direct the film, not surprisingly. And Hollywood was buzzing for months because this guy that many actors adored, and he was on the list of people they idolized, he was coming back. He wasn't really that old at the time. Malick was 52 or 53 when this took place, but he had been out of the big-time filmmaking game since Days of Heaven, where supposedly he left the business because a couple of critics trashed it, and he basically said, I don't need this bullshit, kind of standing up for himself like this is a crock of shit. Pauline Kael ripped on it, but there were just as many people who said Days of Heaven is one of the greatest movies ever made. Malick should have stuck around. But one of the people cast in The Thin Red Line was an actor I had not heard of to that point, named Adrien Brody. And people who had read the book talked about the fact that his character, the character's name is Fife. He's a corporal in the world of the book. He is the central figure, the central focus of the book. Now, for what it's worth, and before I forget, The Thin Red Line right now is actually streaming on Disney+. It's a 3-hour war epic. It was nominated for a ton of Oscars. I think it was nominated for 9, maybe 10 Oscars. It won a couple of technical awards, but it didn't get the big hardware. That was the year of Saving Private Ryan, and Shakespeare in Love kind of sneaking in and stealing Best Picture away from Steven Spielberg and Saving Private Ryan, because Spielberg won Best Director, and then Shakespeare in Love took Best Picture. But Malick was able to assemble an impossible all-star cast, including John Cusack, Nick Nolte, John Travolta, George Clooney, Woody Harrelson, and a lot of people who ended up not being in the movie at all, whose roles were completely cut out, such as Bill Pullman and Mickey Rourke, among many others. All through filming, and this is another answer to a ridiculous trivia question, what major Hollywood production is alleged to have shot the most feet of film in the history of Hollywood? Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. He supposedly shot more than 1 million feet of film. All through filming, which took place mostly in 1997, if I got if my memory is correct here, mostly in 1997. Adrien Brody was in more frames of footage than any other performer. Not surprisingly, I forgot Sean Penn and Jim Caviezel, but Sean Penn was the biggest name in the cast that I didn't mention in my little recap there of the people who were in it, such as Woody Harrelson, such as John Cusack, and Nolte and Travolta and Clooney, etc. All through filming, and Brody has discussed this in interviews, the movie was shot as though Corporal Fife is the lead. That the events, the insanity, the madness of the war in the Pacific is filtered through his perception. And as Terrence Malick went to edit his film, when they finally wrapped principal photography, sometime, I want to say it was the fall or winter of 97, just as Titanic was doing its thing or getting ready to do its thing at the box office, Malick wrapped principal photography and went off to edit his film. And, there is a theory and an idea that often filmmakers find their movie in the editing room. And when Terrence Malick assembled the footage, he came to the inescapable conclusion that the segments with Jim Caviezel and Sean Penn worked the best and were what he wanted to get across more so than what he thought he was shooting. And this seems crazy, but it's not that unusual in Hollywood. It does happen. It doesn't happen that often at the big studio level, and I'll tell you why. Because the studio heads are getting dailies, they're getting rushes, they're getting on-set reports, even in the pre-internet era. And if they think that a filmmaker is going too far off of the movie that they commissioned, someone's going to say something. But that didn't happen here. They had enough faith in Malick, and whatever reports we're getting back during the editing process, I don't recall reading about anything, and I don't recall any studio heads going off on Terrence Malick saying what a fucking asshole, he didn't turn in a cut that we want. No, I haven't read anything. So Malick started to focus more on a character played by Jim Caviezel and Sean Penn. And when the film was getting ready to premiere in New York, I don't believe that anyone had leaked word. No one who saw the final cut said anything to the effect of, well, a movie really focuses more on Jim Caviezel's character and Sean Penn's character. And George Clooney apparently was also on set for quite some time, but he's barely, nobody said anything. And Adrien Brody, according to his telling of the story, I have not seen this, meaning on YouTube. There's a lot of different clips of Brody discussing the film. This I haven't seen. Where Adrien Brody was interviewed at the New York premiere. I believe it was November 1998. That I'm not sure, but it was somewhere in that ballpark. It was definitely fall into the winter. He was interviewed as if he was the star of the film. And when they went out or went into the theater and watched the movie, Adrien Brody has maybe 2 lines of dialogue. Maybe he's in 7 or 8 minutes of the film. Maybe. That's it. To say that he was devastated, how could he not be? Yes, I understand he made money. And the experience of working with Malick, the actual on set, he's not going to say anything bad of him. He still calls him Terry to this day. He doesn't say that fucking asshole. But it was gutting beyond imagination to give that much of himself to a role. They thought he was going to be an Oscar contender that year, because the word on his performance from the rushes was, this kid is fucking brilliant. Whoever he is, he has the right look, he's very attractive, but not in a conventional way, whatever they were saying. But the word was that he was hitting his marks like a champ. And he was a kid. He's 23, 24 years old at this time. During filming, in other words. So he took that horrendous disappointment. And historically, the film is very well remembered, even with the fact that it was supposed to focus on his character and didn't. You go on Rotten Tomatoes, the score, I believe, is in the 90s, and the audience score is very high. It is a film that you have to be patient with. It's not super exciting, but the craftsmanship, the level of detail in every shot, what Malick does there, it is an extraordinary movie. It really is. But Adrien Brody, unfortunately, got the short end of the stick there. But he didn't, whatever hurt and devastation he felt, he turned right around. And the following year, he is in a movie that I absolutely despise, from a filmmaker I really like, with a lot of actors I really like, Summer of Sam, which came out, not surprisingly, in the summer of 1999. So Brody shot the film probably about 6 to 8 months after, finishing work on The Thin Red Line. And I will say, again, unabashed Spike Lee fan. Love the guy. Hey, I know he's controversial, but almost everyone in Hollywood in some way is controversial. That is the worst movie Spike Lee ever made. It is catastrophically bad. John Leguizamo, another actor I like. Michael Rispoli, he plays Grandma in Rounders. Ben Gazzara, great, love him. John Turturro in a cameo, he's funny. Summer of Sam is an atrociously bad film. But Adrien Brody somehow rises above the fray and authors a distinctive, ingenious performance. He is the only one who acquits himself, not just well, he acquits himself marvelously. And so whatever he was going through, it did not affect his performance, and he just kept grinding. And the fact that he didn't say anything publicly, I hate to look at it this way, but it's the 1 + 1 = 2 reality. The fact that he never trashed a revered name such as Malik publicly, the fact that he was virtually silent during that time, not only did people look at him as a massive, major talent, but as somebody who at a young age, despite the disappointment, he kind of knew how to play the system. Smart kid. Things like that were no doubt bandied about by the major players in Hollywood. That's a smart kid right there. I would have cursed that guy up, whatever. And so he kept his eyes clear and his head up. And then he was cast in Roman Polanski, a very notorious figure, in his adaptation of Władek Szpilman's harrowing novel, The Pianist. And it's a story of survival of one man, a very well-respected piano player, classically trained, who gets caught in the madness of World War II, where his family, they get trapped in Hungary. They don't even attempt to leave until it's too late. And he, spoiler alert, tries to figure out how to survive the Nazi invasion, and can one lone man, with a little bit of help, but not enough if you ask me, can he survive all of World War II until the good guys triumph? And Brody's performance in that film, I would say, if someone told me it's top 10 greatest performances of the last 50 years, I don't blink. It's up there with Bobby D in Taxi Driver. Now, that's a transcendent performance. I don't know that Adrien Brody in The Pianist is transcendent so much as he really feels like this guy. The hunger in his eyes, literally, figuratively, spiritually. The anger, the thinly coiled rage that he can't act on because of circumstance. It is so incredible. And when he won the Oscar that year, it was legitimately an upset. He was going against, it might be the single best actor field, where all of the guys gave huge performances. You had Michael Caine in The Quiet American, fucking boss performance by Sir Michael Caine, a 2-time Oscar winner himself, but an absolute boss performance by Caine in that film. You had Nicolas Cage in a movie I don't think is entirely successful adaptation, but a fantastic performance by Cage. He is great in that movie. You had Jack Nicholson in About Schmidt. That is a top 5 best Jack performances. Amazing. And you had Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York. You can't get a more powerhouse field, not just the names, but the strength of their individual performances. About Schmidt, if you haven't seen that, and all you know, Jack Nicholson, Laker girls, the sunglasses, ladies' man, flirting with Jennifer Lawrence after she won her Oscar 10 years ago, it is an incredible Jack Nicholson performance. When he won that Oscar, everyone in the gallery was shocked. But to the credit of Nick Cage and Jack Nicholson, who were sitting next to each other, they got up and they really seemed magnanimous. They both looked like, without saying it, if I wasn't going to win, I'm glad that Adrien won, because that kid was fucking great. And then he had that moment with Halle Berry that, because of Halle Berry, does not look as bad today. Because, Halle Berry was the presenter. She had won the Best Actress Oscar the previous year for Monsters Ball. And Brody, for reasons unknown, swooped in and executed a very much stolen kiss on Halle Berry. And man, she could have had a different reaction than she did. She took it in stride in the moment. I have to assume she was not okay with it. But 22 years hence, she ran into him on the red carpet and she planted a kiss on him. And whatever anger she felt, maybe still feels, she did a great acting job. And she somehow redeemed him by kissing him on the red carpet at these Oscars, where Adrien famously won again for The Brutalist, a kind of movie which he has said, and a lot of people have talked about, is a bit of a companion piece to The Pianist, and I won't go into any more detail for those who haven't seen it. but he is such a galvanizing screen presence. And he's a good interview in the sense that he doesn't say what you expect him to say. He gives you real thoughts and real opinions. And not that it doesn't make him divisive. I don't see him necessarily as a divisive figure. But he does real talk. He gives you his honest appraisal of films which he thought could have been better. I think Hollywoodland, he was a little bit disappointed, working with Ben, who is a phenomenal writer. It's not a criticism of Ben Affleck to say he's a better writer and filmmaker than a screen actor. That's, many people would agree with that. But you look at some of the other interesting choices he made, playing Pat Riley in the Showtime, the HBO docuseries a couple of years ago. I never got any quotes from Pat Riley. I'd be curious, did Pat like the way that Adrien played him, or did he think it was too broad or not broad enough? He had the kind of the big mustache that Pat Riley had in the 70s. That was some great stuff. But he's just, in the movie Predators, he's giving a Shakespearean kind of a performance in the context of a sci-fi horror film. Like, he just has such a sense of verisimilitude no matter what he does. And more so than when he won for The Pianist, he has so many different projects in the pipeline now. And he's just about the most unconventional looking, big-time leading man since maybe the heyday of Dustin Hoffman. But many people would say, no, he's closer to a conventional leading man than Dustin. But he feels like a 70s leading man. He feels like the spirit of the Roy Scheiders and Dustins, and even to some extent Jack Nicholson and Charles Bronson, although, Jack Nicholson is, in his own way, was a lady killer, just of a different kind. But I am and have been a fan since seeing the movie Oxygen before watching The Pianist, and that movie is just, it's incredible. And I hope that his career continues on the same path. Hopefully there are many more great Oscar-worthy roles. And, like, for example, King Kong, it's good, it's not great. And that is a movie that he presumably got on the strength of the fact that he was an Oscar winner. But the role isn't that interesting. He's in a ton of the movie, but he doesn't get to do that much. It's more Jack Black's film, if you ask me. And it's more Jack Black's film than Adrien's. His character just, and Naomi Watts. Jack Black and Naomi Watts are just more important. It's not that great of a role. The effects work, obviously, first rate. I don't know, the movie just kind of left me a little bit cold. And I never saw the show. Sorry to say, I've never seen Peaky Blinders. I had a lot of friends. I remember back in the day at Bev's Gym, a number of people told me, bro, you got to watch this show. Cillian Murphy is great. Adrien Brody is great. I never really watched it. Not that much of a TV guy. Not that I sit in front of the TV watching a ton of movies, but generally speaking, there has to be a pretty big reason for me to sit down and start watching a TV series. Just not really a TV guy. But a happy, belated 52nd birthday to one of the great actors of his or any generation, two-time Oscar winner, Adrien Brody. This has been episode 481 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your miserable Tuesday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then,